The sea was not black. It was a churning, suffocating mass of crude oil, ice, and diesel foam, illuminated by the magnesium-white glare of a dying ship. The SS Ohioan was a C2 class freighter, a good ship, a riveted ship, and she was breaking in half. Her death rattle was not a single sound, but a symphony of industrial failure. First came the whump, a dull, bone-jarring concussion that felt less like an explosion and more like the ship had been punched by God. That was the G7E torpedo from U-91. It struck aft of the engine room, and for 3 seconds, the only sound was the high-pressure scream of escaping steam. Then, the rivets began to pop. On the freezing bridge wing, second mate Al Hamill gripped the rail, his knuckles white. He heard it even over the wind, a catastrophic, rapid-fire pang, 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 like a string of giant firecrackers. It was the sound of the hull seams tearing open. The Ohioan, overburdened with Sherman tanks for Britain, could not take the flex. The torpedo's blast had transferred its kinetic energy down the hull plating, and the rivets, the thousands of metal pins holding the ship together like a steel quilt, were shearing off in sequence. "She's splitting!" the lookout screamed, his voice cracking. "God almighty, she's splitting!" Hamill watched, paralyzed by the physics of the disaster. The fire from the ruptured fuel tanks cast grotesque, dancing shadows. The stern, with its still-turning propeller biting at the air, was already slumping into the troughs. The bow, heavy with tanks, lunged forward. The ship was folding. The final sound was a groan of pure tectonic agony, a sound of 10,000 tons of steel surrendering to the Atlantic. The Ohioan snapped at the keel. The two halves, now independent vertical structures of flame and ruin, slid beneath the waves in less than 90 seconds. The icy water was a shock that stole Hamill's breath. He clung to a wooden crate, his lips already blue. Around him, men were screaming, or worse, silent. The Wolfpack, Gruppe Raubgraf, was still out there, its electric motors a faint, terrifying pulse in the deep. The convoy's escorts, 2 overworked corvettes, were frantically depth-charging phantoms. But Hamill knew the truth. The escorts weren't the real enemy. The U-boats weren't the real enemy. The true enemy was time. The Germans were sinking ships faster than the Allies could build them. And as the fuel oil burned on the surface of the water, clinging to his skin and filling his nostrils with the smell of defeat, Al Hamill knew they were losing the war. Washington, D.C. Warshipping Administration, April 2nd, 1943, 09:30. The air in Admiral Emery S. Land's office was thick with cigar smoke and the dry, papery smell of statistical failure. On a massive chalkboard, 2 lines were drawn. One, in blue, was labeled Allied tonnage launched. The other, in stark, angry red, was Allied tonnage sunk. Since the month before, the red line had soared above the blue. They were in the gap. The Atlantic Gap, the press called it. Admiral Land, a crusty, foul-mouthed veteran of the sea, called it the goddamn drain. "They're not just sinking our ships, gentlemen," Land barked, slapping the chalkboard with a wooden pointer. "They are sinking our schedule. They are sinking the invasion of France. They are sinking Britain. Every tank we lose in the Atlantic is a tank we don't have in Africa. Every barrel of oil is a bomber that stays on the ground in England." He pointed the stick at a row of men in suits. "Our problem is not admirals, it is rivets." The room was full of the most powerful shipbuilders in America. Men from Newport News, from Bath Iron Works, from Bethlehem Steel. They represented an industry of proud, iron-willed tradition. They built the world's best ships, and they built them with rivets. "Admiral," a man from Newport News began, his voice a low gravel, "we are building C2s in 200 days. That's a miracle by any standard. A riveted hull is strong, it's flexible, it's proven. You can't just stamp them out like hubcaps." "The hell I can't," Land roared. "The Germans are building a U-boat in the time it takes you to lay a keel. We are in a tonnage war with Admiral Donitz, and he is winning. Your proven methods are slow. They require thousands of skilled 4-man riveting gangs. Where do you suggest I find 50,000 trained riveters? Do they fall from the sky?" The central problem was brutal and mathematical. A riveted ship was an artisan creation. A 400-foot hull required approximately 650,000 rivets. Each rivet had to be heated to cherry red, tossed by a catcher, caught in a cone, hammered by a bucker-up, and finished by a riveter with a 90-pound pneumatic hammer. It was a violent, complex, and deafeningly slow ballet, and it was failing. "We need a new ship," Land said, his voice dropping to a dangerous quiet. "We need a ship we can build in 60 days. We need a ship that farmers and housewives can build. We need a cargo box, and we need 5,000 of them." Yesterday, a silence fell over the room. The shipbuilders looked at their shoes. It was impossible. A ship was a living, breathing thing, a complex lattice of steel and stress. You couldn't build it like a Model T. "You're asking us to abandon a century of naval architecture," the Bethlehem man said stiffly. "No," Land snapped. "I'm telling you to, because your century of naval architecture is sinking to the bottom of the ocean." The Bethlehem Fairfield Shipyard, Baltimore, Maryland, April 19, 1943, 14. The sound was the problem. You could hear the shipyard from 2 miles away. It wasn't the clang of steel or the hiss of cranes. It was the noise. A deafening, continuous, skull-rattling, rat-tat-tat-tat-tat-tat of 500 pneumatic hammers all firing at once. It was the sound of progress, but to the men in Washington, it was the sound of failure. It was the sound of slow. Mickey O'Hare, a bucker-up for 16 years, pressed his shoulder into the heavy steel dolly, his body vibrating so hard his teeth ached. Across the sliver of bulkhead, his partner, the riveter, hammered the red-hot pin. Rat-tat-tat, pause, rat-tat-tat. "Next!" the foreman yelled over the din. Mickey shuffled 2 feet to his left. He was inside the double bottom of a new C2 freighter, a dark, claustrophobic world of ribs and stringers. The air stank of hot metal, sweat, and coal smoke from the rivet forges. "This is Seam 40B, his foreman, a man named Grogan, grumbled, checking his clipboard. "Should have been done Tuesday. Schedule's shot to hell. What's the rush, Grogan?" Mickey coughed, wiping soot from his face. "We ain't done with 39C yet. Rush is, SS Arthur Middleton got greased off Norfolk," Grogan said. "The one we launched at Christmas. Took him 240 days to build her. Took a U-boat 24 seconds to sink her. The math ain't good, Mickey." The desperation was palpable. Every time a schedule slipped, a shipment of steel plate was late, a riveting gang was out with the flu, a crane failed. It wasn't just a delay, it was a loss. It was another convoy sailing short-handed. It was more men in the water. The yards were at their breaking point. They had streamlined the process as much as they could. They had posters of Uncle Sam pointing, "More ships, more haste." They had pep rallies. But they were still building ships the way they had in 1918. That evening, in the yard's main office, Grogan slammed his logbook on the desk. "It's the cranes, Mr. Harrison. I can't get the stern assembly lifted onto the slipway until Yard 3 finishes their bulkhead. And they can't finish their bulkhead until the riveters from Yard 2 are free. It's a bottleneck. We're choking on our own process." The traditional method was sequential. You laid the keel, the spine. Then you built the ribs. Then you attached the plates, one by one, bottom up. Clang, rat-tat-tat, clang, rat-tat-tat. Every ship was a single, massive project occupying a single precious slipway, and as the men in Baltimore worked until their hands bled, the red line on Admiral Land's chalkboard in Washington kept climbing higher. Warshipping Administration Annex, Washington, D.C., April 20th, 1943, 22:11. Jack Kincaid was not a shipbuilder. He hated the ocean. It was unpredictable, inefficient, and messy. Kincaid was a bridge builder. He came from the flat, logical world of the American Midwest, where steel did what it was told. He built cantilever bridges over the Mississippi, structures of pure, calculated stress and tension. He was a $1-a-year man, dragged to D.C. by Admiral Land, precisely because he wasn't a shipbuilder. "I need someone who doesn't know it's impossible," Land had told him. Kincaid's temporary office was a disaster of blueprints. He was staring at the plans for a C2 freighter, and it made him angry. "It's a damn cathedral," he muttered, tracing the rivet patterns with a pencil. "Look at this. Butt straps, seam straps, overlaps, liners. You're building 2 ships just to hold the first one together. All this extra steel, all this time." He was a man of compressive and tensile forces. To him, a ship was just a beam, a box girder that happened to float. And you didn't rivet a modern bridge. It was too slow, too weak. You welded it. His eyes scanned the mountain of reports on his desk. He picked up a thin, obscure monograph stapled in the corner. A review of arc welding applications in naval hulls by a Dr. Eris Thorne, City and Guilds College, London. 1939. Kincaid had read it 3 times. The British Admiralty had dismissed it. Lloyd's of London was deeply skeptical. Welding, they argued, created brittle points. It didn't allow for the natural flex a ship needed in heavy seas. A riveted seam could give a little. A welded seam would just snap. Kincaid turned to a page showing a micro-photograph of a welded bead. Thorne argued that a proper weld didn't just join 2 plates. It fused them. It made them a single, monocoque piece of steel. It was stronger. It used 15% less steel. And Kincaid's heart hammered. It was fast. You didn't need a 4-man team of athletes. You needed one person, any person, who could learn to draw a straight, steady line with a fiery stick. But Kincaid's mind went further. The British paper was just about the seam. Kincaid was thinking about the factory. He unrolled a fresh sheet of drafting paper. He wasn't going to build a ship on the slipway. He was going to build a bridge. You don't build a bridge in one piece, he whispered, his pencil flying. You build the trusses in a shop. You build the roadbed over there. You build the towers. You prefabricate. You build it in modules. He started sketching. A 50-ton double-bottom section, a 30-ton bulkhead, a complete bow assembly. You could build them all at once in warehouses miles from the water. You could use hundreds of welders on a single piece. Then, you'd bring the massive finished modules to the slipway. Like stacking blocks, he breathed. A giant gantry crane. Lift the engine room, clang. Lift the bow, clang. Weld the few remaining seams. He grabbed his phone. Get me Admiral Land. I don't care what time it is. Tell him I know how to build his cargo box. And I know how to build it in 50 days. The Pentagon, New War Department Building, Arlington, VA, April 22, 1943, 11. The room was full of navy gold braid and civilian suits that cost more than Jack Kincaid's car. Admiral Land had gotten him the meeting, but he was on his own. Mr. Kincaid, began Vice Admiral Harmon, a man whose family had been building warships since the Civil War. You are a bridge engineer. It was not a question, it was an accusation. Yes, sir, Kincaid said, standing beside his blueprints. And a ship is just a bridge that moves. Your problem is assembly. My business is assembly. He laid it out. Modular construction, prefabrication, mass welding. The backlash was immediate and severe. Utterly preposterous, said the man from Newport News, who Kincaid now recognized as a titan of the industry. You want to weld a 400-foot hull with trainees? Sir, a single bad weld, a single cold-rolled seam, and that ship will unzip itself in the first storm it sees. We have standards for a reason. Your standards are sinking us, Kincaid shot back, his Midwestern bluntness cutting through the polite DC air. You're worried about a bad weld. I'm worried about a torpedo. A torpedo doesn't care how pretty your rivet pattern is. A torpedo breaks things. A welded monocoque hull can absorb a blast far better than a riveted quilt that's designed to tear at the seams. And this modular idea, Admiral Harmon interrupted, steepling his fingers. You're talking about lifting 50-ton sections. The cranes don't exist. The logistics are a fantasy. I'll build the cranes, Kincaid said simply. I build bridges, Admiral. Lifting 50 tons is just a Tuesday. We do it. The Germans do it. We're just not doing it here. And the welders? The shipyard man sneered. You mentioned housewives. You're going to trust the integrity of a hull carrying 30 men and 1,000 tanks to a girl from a beauty parlor? I'll trust a person I can train in 100 hours to do one job, weld one seam, over and over, perfectly, Kincaid countered. That's how we build cars. That's how we build B-24s. Your 4-man rivet gang is a relic. This is an assembly line. I'll take a Winnie the Welder over your Rosie the Riveter any day. She'll be twice as fast. The room was hostile. He was an outsider, an academic, a structures man telling them how to build ships. It's based on British theory, Admiral Harmon noted, looking at the Thorne paper. If it's so brilliant, why isn't the Royal Navy doing it? Because they're like you, Kincaid said, violating all protocol. They're traditionalists. They're being bombed. They don't have the space to build the factories my way requires. They don't have the nerve. But we do. Admiral Land, who had been silent, finally spoke. Gentlemen, the President wants his bridge of ships. Kincaid's plan is the only one on my desk that isn't just do the same thing, but faster. It's insane. It's reckless. And it's exactly what we're going to do. He turned to Kincaid. You're not getting Newport News. They won't have you. You're getting Henry J. Kaiser. You're getting a mudflat in Richmond, California. You're getting a blank check. And you've got 6 months to float a ship, or I'll have you building pontoon bridges in Alaska. Am I clear? Clear, Admiral, Kincaid said, already rolling up his blueprints. I only need 4. Kaiser Shipyard No. 2, Richmond, California. July 10th, 1943, 13. Richmond was not a shipyard. It was a 200-acre field of mud, orchestrated chaos and noise. But it was a new noise. The overwhelming rat-tat-tat of Baltimore was gone. In its place was the high-frequency hiss-crackle-hiss-hiss of 4,000 welding torches burning at once. The air smelled of ozone, burnt slag, and the damp fog rolling in from the San Francisco Bay. Jack Kincaid, his suit spattered with mud, stood on a platform overlooking the massive fabrication sheds. He wasn't building a ship. He was building a factory that built parts of ships. Inside Shed 3, a 45-ton double-bottom section complete with all its internal piping and ribbing was being swarmed by welders. Half of them were women, their hair tucked under caps, their faces hidden by dark masks. They wore leather aprons and heavy gloves, moving with a steady, practiced grace. They were the beauty parlor girls, the farmers' daughters, the diner waitresses. Kincaid had trained them in specialized schools, teaching them one weld: downhand, vertical, or the dreaded overhead. Look at 'em, Kaiser, a whirlwind of energy in a fedora, yelled to Kincaid over the din. They're artists. They're drawing with fire, Jack. Kincaid was watching the cranes. He had designed them himself. Massive, whirly gantry cranes, tall as office buildings, that could straddle the slipways and lift 60 tons. They were bridge builders' cranes. A horn blared. A massive, wedge-shaped bow section, complete and painted, was lifted from its jig and began a slow, majestic journey through the air toward Slipway 4. On the slipway, the keel of the SS Patrick Henry had been laid only 40 days prior. It already looked like a ship. This is the part they said was impossible, Kincaid said, his voice tense. The bow section, weighing 58 tons, hovered over the end of the keel. Foremen on the ground guided it with ropes, their shouts swallowed by the noise. With a groaning clang that shivered the ground, the two modules met. "Welders!" the foreman roared. A team swarmed the joint. This was the critical part, welding the modules together, the field weld. Kincaid ran his hand over a completed seam on a nearby bulkhead. It wasn't pretty. It was a thick, raised, uneven scar of metal. A traditionalist would have been appalled. But Kincaid had tested it. He'd taken a sample plate to a university lab. They had to use a 50,000-pound hydraulic press to tear it, and when it failed, the plate had ripped, not the weld. The Patrick Henry was an EC2 type, EC for emergency cargo. The press had already nicknamed her the Liberty Ship. The crews called her the Ugly Duckling. She was 441 feet of blunt angles. She had a simple, antiquated triple-expansion steam engine because they could be built by locomotive factories. She was slow, she was ugly, and she was a box. But as Kincaid watched the bow being stitched onto the hull with electric fire, he saw a weapon. A 10,000-ton steel fist aimed straight at Berlin. Kaiser Shipyard No. 2, Richmond, California. September 27, 1943, 150 days from keel laying. The shipyard was quiet for the first time in 5 months. The hissing of the torches had stopped. Thousands of workers, streaked with sweat and soot, lined the railings and rooftops. A brass band was playing the Star-Spangled Banner. The SS Patrick Henry loomed over them, a gray mountain of steel. She was draped in red, white, and blue bunting. A delegation of Navy brass and skeptical DC suits stood on a platform, including Admiral Harmon. Jack Kincaid stood apart, holding a stopwatch. He hated the ceremony. 150 days. It was a world record, but it was too damn slow. They'd had problems with the gantry alignment and a shortage of electrodes. The next one will be 100, he thought. The one after that, 70. A woman, the wife of a shipyard worker killed in an accident, swung the champagne bottle. It shattered against the welded bow. "I christen thee, SS Patrick Henry." Kincaid clicked his stopwatch. For a heart-stopping second, nothing happened. Then, with a groan of stressed wood, the 10,000-ton ship began to slide. The traditionalists watched, their bodies rigid. They were listening for the pang, pang, pang of shearing rivets, listening for the high-pitched shriek of a failed weld. They expected the ship, under the immense stress of the launch, to crack, to fold, to unzip. The ship gathered speed. The sound was a rumbling, thunderous roar of wood on wood. The grease on the slipway smoked. Kincaid watched the hull, his monocoque box. The Patrick Henry hit the water of the bay. It was not a graceful entry. It was a brutal splash, a displacement of water that sent a wave washing back over the pier. The ship, his bridge that floats, plunged deep, then bounced back up, settling into the water with a heavy, stable sigh. She floated. A roar erupted from the thousands of workers. Men threw their hard hats in the air. The Winnie, the welders, their masks pushed up, were weeping and hugging each other. Admiral Harmon walked over to Kincaid, who was still staring at the ship, his stopwatch in hand. "She floats, Mr. Kincaid." "Of course she floats," Kincaid said, not looking at him. He clicked the stopwatch off. "Now, if you'll excuse me, Admiral, we're laying the keel for the John C. Fremont on that slipway in 10 minutes. We're behind schedule. Barents C., Convoy JW-55B, December 26, 1943, 10:47. The SS Stephen Hopkins was not a warship. She was a Liberty ship, hull number 247, built in 41 days. She was cold, she rattled, and her crew swore she'd been built by plumbers. But she was tough. She was part of the Murmansk Run, the most dangerous supply route on Earth. The Arctic water was so cold it could kill a man in 2 minutes. The sky was a perpetual twilight gray, and it was full of Stuka dive bombers. The sea was full of Gruppe Eisenbart. "Radar contact, bearing 030. Captain Paul Buck, a merchant marine veteran, raised his binoculars. The sea was heavy, the Hopkins wallowing in the troughs, her decks slick with ice. "It's not a U-boat," the armed guard officer, a young Navy lieutenant named Kenneth Willett, said. "It's big." Surface raider. Through the gloom, it emerged. The German heavy cruiser Admiral Hipper and 2 destroyers. They were hunting the convoy. The Hopkins, lagging behind, was the first target. A flash of orange lit the German cruiser's bow. Seconds later, an 8-inch shell screamed overhead. "General quarters, hard to starboard," Buck yelled. The Hopkins was armed with one 4-inch stern gun, a relic from World War I, and a few anti-aircraft cannons. It was a knife against a broadsword. The second salvo hit. An 8-inch shell tore through the unarmored hull plating, exploding in the engine room. The antique steam engine died with a shriek. The ship went dead in the water. A riveted ship might have been crippled, its seams split. But Kincaid's welded box held its shape. "Fire!" Lieutenant Willett ordered the stern gun. The 4-inch gun barked, a pathetic pop against the cruiser's thunder. The Germans, furious that this box hadn't sunk, closed the range, pouring fire into the Liberty. Shells raked the deck. Fire broke out. The radio room was obliterated. But the Hopkins would not die. A shell hit the forward cargo hold, which was full of ammunition. A riveted hull would have been blown to kingdom come. The Hopkins flexed. The welded bulkheads, Kincaid's monocoque design, contained the blast, venting it upward. The ship shuddered, listed, but floated. Lieutenant Willett, his leg shattered, dragged himself to the last remaining gun. He and his men kept firing, scoring impossible, infuriating hits on the German superstructure. They were sailors on a floating box, and they were brawling. The Hopkins was sinking, but she was sinking on her terms. It took the combined firepower of a heavy cruiser and 2 destroyers over an hour to put her under. She had taken dozens of direct hits, any one of which should have sunk her in minutes. The Germans, delayed and damaged by this single defiant freighter, were forced to withdraw as British cruisers, drawn by the fight, closed in. The Battle of the North Cape would be an Allied victory, the convoy saved, and the German surface threat broken. All because an ugly duckling refused to die when it was supposed to. The Stephen Hopkins went down with her guns still firing. Kinkaid's welded experiment hadn't just proven it could float, it had proven it could fight. Kaiser Shipyard, Richmond, California. November 20th, 1944, 15. The ceremony was short. There was no band. The SS Robert E. Peary slid into the water. The crowd gave a polite cheer, then immediately went back to work. Jack Kinkaid clicked his stopwatch. 4 days, 15 hours, and 29 minutes. From keel laying to launch. A 10,000-ton ship, built in the time it used to take a riveting gang to finish a single bulkhead. The Patrick Henry's 150 days seemed like a joke from another century. Kinkaid's impossible idea was now a roaring, unstoppable machine. The Richmond yard alone was launching a ship every 30 hours. The dominoes had fallen. Yards in Portland, Maine, Savannah, Georgia, and Mobile, Alabama had all converted. The hiss of the welding torch was now the sound of American production. The Winnie the Welders were national heroes, their masked faces on the cover of Life magazine. The red line and the blue line on Admiral Land's chart had not just met, they had crossed with violent, decisive force. In 1943, the Allies built 11.5 million tons of shipping. In 1944, they built 14 million. The U-boats, despite sinking more ships than ever, were now being drowned in a sea of steel. They were sinking 1 ship for every 10 Kinkaid and Kaiser launched. Washington, D.C. Joint Chiefs of Staff meeting. December 5th, 1944, 10. Jack Kinkaid, in his same rumpled suit, stood before a map of the world. This time, no one was sneering. General Marshall and Admiral King were listening. "Gentlemen," Kinkaid said, "we have solved the tonnage problem. The bridge to Britain is built. The pipeline for Overlord is full." He pointed to the Pacific. But the problem has changed. We are no longer building a bridge. We are building a pier. General MacArthur needs a new kind of ship, a ship that can land 50 tanks directly onto a hostile beach. A landing ship, tank. He unrolled a new blueprint. The British have a design, but it's riveted. It's slow. We're going to build it my way. All welded, prefabricated. We will build them in the Midwest, in shipyards in Illinois and Indiana, and sail them down the Mississippi. Admiral King stared. "You want to build ocean-going warships in a cornfield?" "A ship is a box, Admiral," Kinkaid said, his confidence now absolute. "It doesn't matter where you build the box, as long as you have water to float it in. Give me the word, and I'll build you 1,000 LSTs before the invasion of Japan." The room was silent. The bridge builder from the Midwest had just redesigned the entire logistics of the United States Navy. Admiral Land grinned, lit a cigar, and said, "Give the man his cornfield." U.S. Maritime Commission Damage Report File, SS Schenectady, 44-01-17, January 17, 1944. The victory was not without its cost. Kinkaid's revolution had a flaw, a terrible, hidden flaw. The SS Schenectady, a new all-welded T2 tanker, was docked in Portland, Oregon. The sea was calm. The air was cold. There was no storm, no torpedo. At 23:30, with a sound like a thunderclap, the Schenectady snapped in half. She didn't tear. She fractured. The steel hull, Kinkaid's monocoque, had cleaved clean through as if cut by a giant razor. The news hit Washington like a torpedo. Admiral Harmon, his face pale, threw the damage report on Kinkaid's desk. "Explain this, Mr. Kinkaid. Your miracle ship just committed suicide. In harbor." Kinkaid was horrified. He flew to Portland. He stared at the 2 halves of the ship resting on the riverbed. The break was crystalline, brittle. The enemy, it turned out, was not the Germans. It was physics. Dr. Eris Thorne's paper had been correct, but Kinkaid's application had been too fast. The steel being used, coupled with the rapid, sometimes imperfect welds from the trainees, had a hidden weakness. In the extreme cold of the North Atlantic, or even a cold night in Oregon, the steel could undergo brittle fracture. A riveted hull with its overlapping plates had natural crack arresters. A crack could only go as far as the next seam. In Kincaid's all-welded hull, there were no seams. A microscopic crack starting from a single bad weld had nothing to stop it. It could propagate at the speed of sound, splitting the entire ship in an instant. "They're calling them Kincaid's caskets," Harmon told him grimly. "We've had 12 other ships suffer major fractures. The Germans know it. U-boat command is telling its captains to stop using torpedoes." "What?" "New tactic. They're surfacing, firing 88mm shells at the waterline. They're not trying to sink the ship. They're trying to start a crack. They want the cold water to do the rest." Kincaid felt sick. His solution was now a liability. "Shut it down," Harmon ordered. "We're going back to rivets. It's over." "No," Kincaid said, his voice quiet but hard. "We don't go back. We fix it." He didn't sleep for a week. He brought in metallurgists, academics, and, most importantly, the shipyard foreman. They analyzed the Schenectady steel. They changed the welding rod composition. They improved training, emphasizing preheating and peening the welds to relieve stress. But Kincaid's most brilliant fix was an ironic concession. "We can't stop the cracks from starting," he explained, sketching on a napkin. "The steel isn't perfect. The welds aren't perfect. But we can stop them from spreading." He drew a long welded hull. Then he drew 3 thick black lines across it. "We add riveted seams," he said, "not everywhere. Just 4 strategic crack arresters. We'll build the ship in massive welded modules, but we'll join the modules with a single, old-fashioned riveted strap. It's a hybrid." It was an admission of partial failure, but a masterpiece of pragmatic engineering. The innovation adapted. The new composite seam Liberty ships were built almost as fast, but they were safe. The fractures stopped. Kincaid had beaten the physics, and in doing so, beaten the U-boat's new tactic. Stateside Hospital, Staten Island, New York, February 11, 1945. Jack Kincaid hated hospitals. They smelled of antiseptic, fear, and solutions that had come too late. He was on a PR tour, against his will, to visit the brave boys of the Merchant Marine. He walked through the burns ward. The men here were from a T2 tanker, the SS Murfreesboro, which had been hit by a U-boat and burned for 3 days. A young man, no older than 20, was lying in a bed, his face and arms a waxy, scarred ruin. Only his eyes were clear. He was from Texas. You're him," the sailor whispered, his voice a dry rasp. "I seen your picture in Life." Kincaid stopped. He nodded, unable to speak. "You're Mr. Kincaid. You're the man who builds them so fast." Kincaid's $1-a-year salary, his awards, his triumph in Washington, it all turned to ash in his mouth. We called them expendables," the sailor rasped. "The ugly ducklings. We knew you built them to sink." "No," Kincaid said, his voice thick. "We built them to float. We built them to win." "Y'all built so many," the sailor continued, a single tear tracing a path through the scarred tissue. "It was just math. You built them. The Germans sank them. But you built more. You knew you was sending us out there to absorb the torpedoes, so the real ships, the carriers and the battleships, could get through." The sailor tried to lift a bandaged hand. "It's okay, sir. We knew the job. You did yours." Kincaid stood frozen. The sailor was right. His bridge of ships was a cold logistical calculation. He had traded speed for safety. He had weaponized mass production, but the ammunition was steel boxes and the propellant was men. The merchant marine casualty rate was 1 in 26, higher than any branch of the armed forces save the Marine Corps. He had built the bridge to victory, but he had paved it with the bodies of men like this sailor from Texas. I'm sorry," Kincaid whispered. "Don't be," the sailor said, his eyes closing from the effort. "Just keep building them, sir. Get it done." Kincaid walked out of the hospital and was sick in the gutter. His success felt like a winding sheet. He had solved the engineering problem, but the moral equation would haunt him forever. The English Channel, off Omaha Beach, June 7, 1944, 05, D-Day +1. The sea was not empty. It was a place. It was a 20-mile wide city of ships, anchored stem to stern as far as the eye could see. Jack Kincaid stood on the bridge of the destroyer USS Satterley, a guest of the Navy. He was here to see his work. The noise was a constant rolling thunder from the beaches and the naval guns. The air smelled of salt, cordite, and diesel. But Kincaid was looking at the logistics. It was the greatest armada in human history, and it was an armada built of welds. There were the LSTs, his cornfield ships, nosing onto the beaches, their great bow doors opening to disgorge tanks and trucks. There were the LCI, landing craft infantry, also welded. And just offshore, forming a vast protective crescent, were the Liberty ships. Dozens of them. They weren't just transport, they were breakwaters. The Allies had intentionally scuttled 50 of them, Kincaid's ugly ducklings, to create the Gooseberry artificial harbors, protecting the beachhead from the vicious channel storms. More Liberties were arriving every hour, a floating pipeline of bullets, beans, blood plasma, and fuel. A young Navy ensign on the bridge turned to him. "It's the Mulberry Harbors, sir. That's the miracle." Kincaid shook his head, pointing to the endless line of freighters on the horizon. "No, that is the miracle. The miracle is that we have ships to spare. The miracle is that we can sink 50 of them on purpose and not even feel the loss. The invasion of Europe, the liberation of France, the entire Allied war effort in the West. It was only possible because Kincaid had built a bridge of expendable, ugly, mass-produced ships across the Atlantic." In his post-war debriefing, German Grand Admiral Karl Dönitz would write, "The sinking of ships, which had been our most potent weapon, was rendered blunt by one single factor: the enemy's ability to build ships not by craft, but by an assembly line method that defied all our calculations." Kincaid received the Medal for Merit, the highest civilian honor. The citation, signed by President Roosevelt, praised his logistical genius. Kincaid kept it in a desk drawer. Massachusetts Institute of Technology, MIT, Cambridge, October 15, 1965. Professor Jack Kincaid, his hair now white, his rumpled suit now augmented by academic elbow patches, sketched on a chalkboard. He was teaching Structural Engineering 401. A young, eager student raised his hand. "Professor Kincaid, you're famous for the Liberty ships, but wasn't it true they were badly built? That they broke in half?" The class grew quiet. Kincaid put the chalk down, the white dust powdering his hands. He looked at the classroom, but for a moment he was back in the cold, ozone-filled air of the Richmond Yard. "Yes," Kincaid said, his voice quiet. "They were. The Schenectady broke in half. Others did too. The steel was wrong. The welds were hurried. We were moving too fast." He turned back to the board. "But you must understand. Perfection is the enemy of good enough. And in wartime, good enough is the only thing that wins." He drew 2 lines. The British, with Dr. Thorne's brilliant paper, wanted a perfect weld. They debated it, tested it, and ultimately were too afraid to use it. They wanted a ship that would last for 30 years. "We," he said, tapping the board, "didn't need a ship to last 30 years. We needed 5,000 ships to last 30 weeks. We needed to build them faster than the Germans could sink them. We solved the right problem." He looked at the student. They were ugly. They were slow. They rattled and they leaked, but they worked. They were the good enough that saved the world. Never forget that. Your calculations must always serve the mission. A historian decades later stands in front of a surviving Liberty ship, the SS Jeremiah O'Brien, in San Francisco. Jack Kincaid and the engineers of the War Shipping Administration, building on a kernel of British theory, did not just build ships, they built a system. They took the most complex, massive object made by man and put it on a Detroit assembly line. This revolution, modular construction and mass welding, did more than just win the Battle of the Atlantic. It defined the entire post-war world. The supertankers, the massive container ships, the very skeleton of global trade that we rely on today. All of it is built on the crazy idea that you could build a ship like a bridge. Of the 2,710 Liberty ships built, most were scrapped, sold, or sunk, but they had done their job. They were the expendable, ugly, perfect weapons that bought the time and the victory that the Allies so desperately needed.